Welcome back to the Centre for Christian Spirituality. Thank you for joining us again as we reflect on the Gospel of next Sunday, the fifth Sunday after Easter. We invite you now to listen to the Gospel read. When he, Judas, had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little bit longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." It's only a short gospel, but it's certainly got a lot of significance in it. I think the opening point it needs to be made is that Judas has left the room. In other words, it's almost like the lights have now come up because the darkness has gone out of it. So Judas leaves, and then Jesus begins a long discourse, which is really, I always think, the most interesting in the Gospel of St. John. And then we've got a few verses about glorification. I think an important basic principle to remember about all this glorification is that the glory of God in the Old Testament was always the visible presence of the invisible God. So at the time of the Exodus, God was there in various ways in the pillar of fire that led the Jewish people out from the Exodus. So when we talk about glory and glorification, I think that's a good principle to keep in mind. I think in talking about Jesus to begin with, the glory is the completion of what he has done, and of course that is the presence of the Father. And then he talks about the Father will glorify him. And somebody once said to me many years ago, when I was talking about Calvary as an act of Jesus, which it is, that it's also an act of the Father. In other words, the Father is the orchestration. He's sort of the producer, as it were, that puts it on. And putting it on, it's his presence. It's the glory of God. It's the way God is present in this event. And of course, it's a controversial event to actually be present in. So the glorification there points to Calvary, but it also points beyond that to the glorification when Jesus will be with his Father again. The second part there, and of course the fact that Jesus is leaving, I think all of these Gospels that we're going to be considering over the next few weeks are from the last discourse of Jesus. And last discourses are a particular literary form in the Scriptures. Moses gave a last talk. The Book of Deuteronomy is basically his final talk. And it's always about the future and about what is to be done in the future and things that might happen in the future. And that comes through in this as well. The point that's singled out for the future here is the question of love and the new commandment. I think the newness of the commandment, we can't say that the Old Testament doesn't speak about love, but the newness of the commandment for me is to love as Jesus loved. In other words, that we've got a model of love that I think goes beyond what was clearly explicit in the Old Testament. And the point that all will know who the Christians are by their love is pointing to the witness. Because I think we'll see it in Luke in one of the Gospels coming up, that the final discourse usually talks about witness. In other words, as Jesus goes away, he is present in those who have seen him and who are to witness to him. So those are my thoughts coming out of that.
Yeah, I see this like you, this heart of the gospel. It's significant, almost like his last will and testament.
It is.
In a way, isn't it?
That's what it is.
And interesting that it's not a prayer that he gives us.
No.
It's not an approach to worship, but it's an action of loving. And yet it's in this love, as I have loved you, that we are drawn together as a community whereby that love is manifested in the way in which we as a community accompany one another on the journey of life. It's a way in which we support one another in the midst of the joys and sorrows, and it's also a love that invites us to be Christ to others. So it's a pretty significant kind of take on the commandment of love.
I think so. And there's tons of theology and Trinitarian insight, but it's all done within that context of love, I think, there.
Wow. I get very nervous when I know it's John's Gospel because I kind of go into a little bit of a spasm.
That's right.
That happened again today, because when he starts talking about I will be glorified and you will be glorified and you'll be glorified in me.
Very confusing.
And I'm thinking to myself, I just put it down to a mystery because it kind of doesn't make perfect sense. And the other part of my brain is saying, thank God we have this extraordinary mystery of John who's trying to hold together what's absolutely indescribable. Yeah. So I'm holding both of those things. And then the line, where you're going, you can't come where I'm going. And immediately I'm thinking, hang on, I thought you were going to prepare a house for me and it's a spot for me. But it kind of reminded me of that Martha when he says, stop clinging to me. So it's this strangeness about where Jesus is and where he'll reside in his glory. And the one about love one another as I have loved you. That sounds so simple. Love one another as I have loved you. I'm flat out loving people who I do love. It's such a hard thing to love, and then to love as Jesus loved, and then you'll be my disciples, because people say, they must be Christians. Wow. What I feel it's a huge stretch. Like, I'm glad it's there, but it's an immense stretch to love as Jesus loved.
Yes, it is.
I'm flat out loving, in an ordinary human way on a daily basis. I could, but to love as Jesus loved.
Yes.
Wow.
And I think it's important to distinguish between a feeling love and a love of the will.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, you could love somebody of the will where there's no feeling or anything in it at all.
Yes.
And that basically is what we're talking about here, I think.
And to go to where Jesus went, like all those parts in the gospel. I always think, I wouldn't have gone to touch that man's eyes and that man's
that's
this.
right.
Oh.
And that's the example of the principle.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. Well, it's disturbing.
Yeah,
Yet again, John, I've gone into the...
God.
We have that same kind of reaction with some of the things that Francis does, don't we?
Yes.
Yes.
Remember the guy with the, all that disfigurement on his head?
Yes.
And how there was a certain revulsion.
That's right, yes. Yes. Okay, well, we invite you now to look at the text and see what comes out of it for you. It's important that you do that without actually trying to repeat what we've done, but it's an encounter between you and the Lord through the Scriptures. So see what it is now that you draw out from this particular text. Welcome back. We invite you now to listen to the reading again.
When Judas had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I had said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another."
We might just draw out now some practical thing that we might do in our lives. For me, I think loving as Jesus loved is the issue, and I think I would like to single out perhaps somebody that I perhaps don't reach out in love, even sort of with a will love to love a person. So it's an examination of conscience, as it were.
For me, it was love one another as I have loved you. It's to me that is, it's really hard, and I know that's what my heart's been called to do. So that's what I'll try and ponder and improve on.
Again, for me too, it's that love, because it's in the Acts of the Apostles, isn't it, that the way in which Christians love one another, that they came to first to be called Christians. So I just want to I guess it's a little bit like you say, David, an examination of conscience, but it's picking up that love, Virginia, too. What does that mean in my life? How does the love that I say I have reflect the person of Jesus? So perhaps particularising it, that the person I love the least, perhaps the person that I want to try to pray for the very best for that person.
Mm-hmm. We invite you now to look for something practical in the text. Remember that engaging with the scriptures is a process. The beginning is what's in the scriptures, and the end of the process is that it be in your heart and in your life. So it's important that we draw out practical things. So we invite you now to look at the text and see what practical thing you can introduce into your life as a result of reflecting on this text. It's one thing to choose something to do, and it's another thing to do it. And I'm sure we've all experienced sometimes that we choose but we don't do. So I think we need to ask the Lord to help us to do that. He said, without me you can do nothing. So let us just pause for a moment and ask the Lord to give us the strength and the courage to put into practice what we have decided. Thank you for being with us as we've reflected on the Gospel of the next Sunday. We will be doing this each week, so we invite you to join us again. And we conclude in our usual way by reading from the prayer of the Liturgy of the fifth Sunday after Easter.
Almighty ever-living God, constantly accomplish the Paschal mystery within us, that those you were pleased to make new in holy baptism may under your protective care bear much fruit and come to the joys of life eternal, through Christ our Lord.